Grandma, leave here, now. My grandson grabbed my arm in panic at what I thought was just a family birthday party. His eyes were wide with fear, and he was practically dragging me toward the exit. I was confused. The evening had been lovely. Great food, expensive wine, interesting conversations about my real estate business. Why was Tyler so desperate to get me out of there? Please, he whispered urgently, just trust me. Something's very wrong. I'd never seen him like this before. In 20 years, Tyler had never lied to me, never steered me wrong. So despite everyone calling after us, despite the awkward stares, I followed him outside. What he told me in that parking lot changed everything. See, 3 days earlier, I'd had a heated argument with my daughter and son-in-law about money. They wanted me to invest in another one of his schemes, and I'd refused. The confrontation got ugly, and they'd stormed out of my house. But I never imagined how far they'd go to get what they wanted. I never suspected what they'd been planning all along. And I definitely never expected to discover just how many people were involved in what happened next. By the time this story is over, you'll see how a simple family disagreement turned into something so much darker, how trust can be weaponized, how desperation can drive people to unthinkable acts, and how sometimes the people you'd least expect become your greatest allies. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to Never Too Old channel. We're creating a community of incredible women who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, back to the story. The front door slammed so hard it rattled the picture frames on my hallway wall. Julie stormed into my living room without so much as a hello, her heels clicking sharply against my hardwood floors like gunshots. Mom, we need to talk, right now. I set down my afternoon tea and folded the property management newsletter I'd been reading. At 69, I'd learned that when someone burst into your home making demands, the best response was calm deliberation. Good afternoon to you too, sweetheart. Would you like some tea? This isn't a social visit. Julie dropped her designer purse on my coffee table with deliberate force. Brad has an incredible opportunity, and we need your help. Behind her, Brad Hayes shuffled through my doorway, looking uncomfortable. My son-in-law had the demeanor of a man who'd rather be anywhere else, which told me everything I needed to know about whose idea this visit really was. What kind of opportunity? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Julie's eyes lit up with the same fervor I'd seen too many times before. A tech startup. Revolutionary food delivery using AI and blockchain technology. Brad's been selected as a founding investor. I walked to my home office, my slippers silent on the Persian rug I'd bought after selling my first apartment building. The filing cabinet opened with a familiar metallic whisper. The folder labeled Brad Hayes Investments 2018-2025 felt heavier each time I pulled it out. Revolutionary, you say? I spread the documents across my dining room table. Like the cryptocurrency mining operation was revolutionary? Brad's face flushed red. Mom, that was different. The market crashed unexpectedly. $45,000 lost to a company that existed only on Instagram. I pulled out bank statements. Then there was the organic smoothie franchise. The location wasn't right. Julie interjected quickly. $38,000 for equipment that's currently gathering dust in your garage. I continued shuffling papers. And my personal favorite, the imported luxury car business. Those regulations changed without warning, Brad mumbled. $52,000 to a man who disappeared with your deposit money the day before delivery. I closed the folder. That's $135,000 of my money, gone, not invested, gone. Julie's composure cracked. You always focus on the failures. What about Brad's successes? I'm still waiting to see one. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Henderson working in her garden, the normal sounds of a quiet Tuesday afternoon in our Beaverton neighborhood. This is different, Julie said, her voice rising. The startup has real backing, real technology, real potential for massive returns. Show me the business plan. We don't have it with us, but then you don't have my money. Brad stepped forward, finally finding his voice. Mrs. Sullivan, I understand your hesitation, but this is a limited time offer. The investment window closes Friday. How convenient. Just like the cryptocurrency deadline and the smoothie franchise early bird special. I stood up, indicating the conversation was over. The answer is no. Julie's mask of politeness finally slipped completely. You're being selfish, Mom. You're sitting on all this wealth while your own family struggles. I'm sitting on the results of 40 years of 16-hour days, difficult tenants, and property renovations I did with my own hands. My voice remained steady, but I felt the familiar fire building in my chest, wealth I earned through careful planning and hard work. Times have changed, Julie snapped. You don't understand modern business. Everything moves faster now. Scams have always moved fast, dear. That's how they work. Brad grabbed Julie's arm. We should go. But Julie wasn't finished. Fine. When Brad makes millions from this opportunity, don't come asking for your share, and don't expect us to take care of you when you're too old to manage all those properties alone. The threat hung in the air like smoke. After they left, slamming the door hard enough to make my china cabinet shudder, I stood in my living room listening to the echo of their footsteps fade away. Through the window, I watched them argue beside their car. Julie's arms gestured wildly while Brad shook his head. Whatever they were discussing, it was heated enough to draw stares from neighbors walking their dogs. I returned to my filing cabinet and pulled out a different folder. This one contained property deeds, bank statements, and investment portfolios representing 4 decades of careful wealth building. Sullivan Properties now owned 312 rental units across 3 counties. Not bad for a woman who'd started with a single duplex and a dream. Julie was right about one thing. Times had changed, but some things remained constant. Hard work, honest dealing, and the consequences of poor judgment. I made fresh tea and settled back into my chair, returning to the property management newsletter. The afternoon stretched ahead peacefully, filled with the simple satisfaction of having stood my ground. Outside, a car engine roared to life with unnecessary force. Through my lace curtains, I watched Brad's BMW speed away, tires squealing slightly as they turned the corner onto Cedar Street. The quiet that followed felt ominous. Morning sunlight streamed through my kitchen window as I prepared for my weekly property inspections. At 69, I still insisted on personally checking every building in my portfolio. Tenants respected landlords who showed up, and problems were easier to solve when caught early. I grabbed my inspection clipboard and car keys, then opened the front door to retrieve my morning newspaper. The sight that greeted me stopped me cold. My mailbox lay twisted and broken on the sidewalk, the metal post bent at an unnatural angle like a broken bone. The wooden post had been attacked with what looked like a baseball bat, splintered pieces scattered across my front lawn. But worse was the splash of bright red paint across my white front door, dripping down like blood, with the word selfish spray-painted in jagged letters. My stomach dropped as I surveyed the damage. This wasn't random vandalism. This was personal. This was a message. I walked carefully around the debris, checking for other damage. My flower beds had been trampled, tulips crushed under heavy footprints. The timing was obvious. Sometime between midnight and dawn, after our confrontation yesterday afternoon. Patricia, dear God, what happened? Mrs. Henderson's voice carried across the small gap between our properties. She stood on her porch in her morning robe, coffee mug in hand, staring at the destruction with genuine shock. Vandalism, apparently. I kept my voice steady, though anger burned in my chest. I heard the noise around 2 a.m., thought it might be raccoons getting into garbage cans again. She stepped closer to her property line. There was a car idling on the street for a while, dark-colored sedan. I almost called the police, but then it drove away. The timeline crystallized in my mind. 2 a.m. vandalism. A waiting car. The personal nature of the attack. Someone had come prepared with spray paint and a weapon, targeting my home specifically after yesterday's confrontation. Did you see who was driving? Mrs. Henderson shook her head. Too dark, and I wasn't wearing my distance glasses, but the engine sounded expensive, not one of those little economy cars. Brad drove a BMW. Expensive engine. dark blue paint that could look black at night. I pulled out my phone and called the non-emergency police line. Vandalism required documentation, especially when I suspected who was responsible. "I'll be a witness if you need one," Mrs. Henderson offered. "This is a safe neighborhood. We look out for each other here." The police officer arrived within an hour, a young woman who took detailed photos and notes. She seemed genuinely concerned about the personal nature of the attack. "Any recent disputes with neighbors? Business conflicts? Family issues?" I hesitated. Accusing Julie and Brad without proof could backfire spectacularly. But the pattern was obvious to anyone who understood family dynamics. "I had a disagreement with my daughter and son-in-law yesterday afternoon about money." The officer's expression shifted to understanding. She'd probably seen similar cases before. "We'll file a report and increase patrols in the area. Do you have security cameras?" "No, but I'm thinking about installing some." After she left, I stood in my driveway staring at the damage. The broken mailbox could be replaced, the paint could be cleaned off, but the violation felt deeper than property damage. They'd attacked my home, my sanctuary, the place where I'd built my life after my husband died. My phone buzzed. Text message from Julie. "Hi, Mom. Hope you slept well. Thinking about our conversation yesterday. Maybe we were all too emotional. Could we try again?" The casual tone, the fake concern, the complete absence of any reference to the vandalism. Either she was genuinely unaware of what had happened, or she was an accomplished actress. I decided not to respond immediately. Instead, I called the property management company I used for maintenance emergencies. "Mike, it's Patty Sullivan. I need a cleanup crew and a new mailbox installation today, and get me 3 quotes on security camera systems." "Everything okay, Mrs. Sullivan?" "Just some unexpected property damage. Nothing I can't handle." By afternoon, the paint was gone and a new mailbox stood in place of the destroyed one. The security camera installer would come Thursday, but the message had been delivered clearly: cross Julie and Brad, and there would be consequences. I spent the evening reviewing my property portfolio, calculating exactly how much wealth they thought they were entitled to inherit. Sullivan Properties was worth approximately $8.2 million in current market value. The rental income provided a comfortable living while building long-term equity. This wasn't just about Brad's latest scheme. This was about control, about forcing me to subsidize their lifestyle through intimidation and family guilt. My phone rang at 9 p.m., Julie's name on the caller ID. "Hi, Mom. I heard from Mrs. Peterson that there was some vandalism in your neighborhood last night. Are you okay?" Mrs. Peterson lived 4 houses down. She couldn't have seen my mailbox from her front window. Someone had told Julie about the damage, or Julie already knew because she'd been involved. "I'm fine, dear. Just some random property damage." "That's terrible. You should really consider moving to a safer area, maybe somewhere closer to us where we could keep an eye on you." The suggestion felt less like concern and more like another attempt at control. Move closer to them. Become more dependent, more vulnerable to pressure. "I'm very happy where I am." "Well, if you change your mind, we know a great realtor who specializes in senior housing transitions." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, thinking about patterns: yesterday's confrontation, last night's vandalism, today's fake concern and suggestion that I move to a safer area. This wasn't ending with one angry visit. Julie and Brad had started something they intended to finish. Time to start documenting everything. 3 days passed in deceptive calm. I installed the security cameras, replaced my damaged tulips, and returned to my normal routine of property inspections and tenant communications. But I remained alert, watching for the next move in whatever game Julie and Brad were playing. The call came Friday morning while I was reviewing rental applications. "Mom, I owe you an apology." Julie's voice carried a warmth I hadn't heard in months. "Brad and I talked, and we realized we came on too strong Tuesday. We were stressed about finances, and we took it out on you unfairly." I set down my coffee cup, instantly suspicious. Julie never apologized. Even as a child, she'd found ways to justify her behavior rather than admit fault. That's thoughtful of you to say. We want to make it right. Brad's birthday is tomorrow, and we're having a small family celebration. Nothing fancy, just dinner at Riverside Grill. Tyler will be there, and he specifically asked if Grandma could come. The mention of my grandson stirred something protective in my chest. Tyler had always been different from his parents, grounded and honest where they were calculating and manipulative. If he wanted me there, how could I refuse? What time? 7 o'clock. And Mom, please don't bring a gift. Your presence is gift enough. After hanging up, I sat in my home office considering the invitation. The timing felt convenient. 3 days after our confrontation, 1 day after my security cameras were installed, suddenly they wanted family reconciliation. But Tyler's request complicated things. At 20, he was the one bright spot in an increasingly troubled family dynamic. A business major at Portland State, he'd shown genuine interest in learning about property management and seemed to understand the value of hard work. I decided to accept, but carefully. Riverside Grill was a public restaurant, not their home where they could control the environment. Other diners would be present. What could they really do in such a setting? Saturday evening, I chose my outfit with deliberate care. Conservative navy dress, comfortable shoes, small purse containing my phone, keys, and credit cards. I left my checkbook at home, along with any documents they might pressure me to sign. The taxi dropped me at Riverside Grill at exactly 7 o'clock. Through the restaurant's large windows, I could see Julie and Brad at a corner table, along with several people I didn't recognize. The gathering looked larger than the small family celebration Julie had described. Tyler spotted me first as I entered the restaurant. At 20, he'd inherited his grandmother's height and his grandfather's steady demeanor. His smile when he saw me was genuine, untainted by his parents' recent manipulations. "Grandma Patty!" He wrapped me in a hug that felt like the most honest greeting I'd received all week. "I'm so glad you came. Wouldn't miss your father's birthday, sweetheart. How are finals going?" "Brutal, but manageable. I've been thinking about our conversation last month about property valuation methods. I have some questions for you later." Julie appeared beside us, wearing an expensive dress I'd never seen before. "Mom, you look wonderful. Come meet everyone." The table had been set for 10 people, not the intimate family dinner I'd expected. Brad's colleagues from his latest consulting job sat alongside neighbors I vaguely recognized. The wine selection impressed me, bottles that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. "Mrs. Sullivan, so wonderful to finally meet you." A man in an expensive suit extended his hand. "Brad's told us so much about your real estate empire. Quite an accomplishment for someone who started with nothing." The comment felt loaded, though I couldn't identify exactly why. How did Brad's work colleagues know details about my business background? As dinner progressed, the conversation repeatedly returned to real estate investments, market trends, and retirement planning. The questions felt rehearsed, as if these people had been briefed on topics designed to engage me in discussion. "Tyler tells us you built your portfolio through incredible discipline," one woman commented. "Always paying cash, never over-leveraging. Such old-school wisdom in today's credit-driven market." I glanced at Tyler, who was focused intently on his dinner, not participating in the real estate discussion. Something about his posture suggested discomfort. The wine flowed freely throughout the meal. My glass seemed to refill itself whenever I wasn't paying attention, though I'd only taken small sips. Julie and Brad kept proposing toasts. To family, to success, to second chances, to the future. By the third course, I felt unusually relaxed despite my earlier caution. The wine was exceptional, smooth and rich, probably aged longer than some of the dinner guests had been alive. Even my suspicions about the evening's true purpose seemed less important now. "Grandma, could I talk to you privately for a minute?" Tyler's voice cut through my wine-induced haze. "Outside?" Something in his tone triggered an alarm I'd learned to trust over 40 years in business. When someone you trusted completely suddenly sounded urgent, you listened. "Of course, sweetheart." I started to rise from my chair, but Julie immediately appeared beside me. Tyler, what's wrong? We haven't even had cake yet. Just need some air. The restaurant's pretty warm. Brad stepped closer, his smile never wavering. Son, your grandmother was just starting to relax. Why don't you wait until after dessert? But Tyler's expression had changed. Gone was the easy college student demeanor, replaced by something that looked like fear mixed with determination. Grandma, we need to go outside, right now. The desperation in my grandson's voice sobered me instantly. In 20 years, I'd never seen Tyler look genuinely frightened. Confused? Yes. Frustrated with his parents, certainly. But never this kind of raw urgency. I think I could use some fresh air too, I said, beginning to stand despite Julie and Brad's hovering presence. Mom, don't be ridiculous. Julie's cheerful facade cracked slightly. We have a special dessert coming, and there are people here who want to talk business with you. Something in their coordinated response triggered the same alarm I'd felt Wednesday morning when I discovered the vandalism. When people worked this hard to keep you somewhere, it usually meant you needed to be somewhere else. The evening's been lovely. But Tyler's right. I could use some air. I moved toward the restaurant exit, but Julie stepped into my path. Just 5 more minutes, Mom. There's someone special Brad wants you to meet. Tyler made a sound that might have been a stifled warning. When I looked at him, his eyes were wide with something that looked like panic. That decided it? I trusted Tyler completely, and right now he was telling me to leave. Thank you for a wonderful dinner, I said firmly, stepping around Julie toward the door. I'll call you tomorrow. Outside in the cool evening air, Tyler grabbed my arm with surprising intensity. Grandma, we need to get you out of here, fast. Tyler led me quickly across the restaurant's parking lot, away from the large windows where our table was visible. Under the streetlights, I could see his hands trembling as he pulled out his phone. I'm calling you a taxi. You can't go back in there. The urgency in his voice cut through the last of my wine-induced relaxation. Tyler, what's happening? What's wrong? He looked back toward the restaurant, then moved us further into the shadows between parked cars. Grandma, I overheard Mom and Dad planning something terrible. They weren't just trying to get you drunk tonight. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? They put something in your wine. Some kind of drug that makes people confused and compliant. I heard Mom talking to Dad about it yesterday when they thought I was at class. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not just alcohol manipulation, but actual drugging. My own daughter had been poisoning me. Are you certain about this? Tyler nodded, his young face grim with knowledge no 20-year-old should have to carry. Mom got the drug from her friend Rachel, who works at a veterinary clinic. It's something they use to calm aggressive animals before procedures, makes them docile and confused. My legs felt suddenly unsteady. I leaned against a parked car, trying to process the enormity of what Tyler was telling me. How long have you known? I started getting suspicious Tuesday night after you guys fought. Mom and Dad were whispering about Plan B and making phone calls to people I didn't recognize. Then yesterday I came home early and heard Mom on the phone saying the drug will make her compliant enough to sign anything we put in front of her. The restaurant seemed to spin slightly as I absorbed this information. Everything made sense now. The larger gathering to provide witnesses, the constant wine refills, the rehearsed questions about my business designed to establish my mental competence before the drugs took full effect. Tyler, where were they planning to take me? There's a private dining room upstairs. Dad reserved it for after dinner. He told everyone you wanted to discuss business opportunities in a quieter setting. Tyler's voice cracked with emotion. Grandma, there are lawyers up there. Real lawyers with real documents. The complete picture crystallized with terrifying clarity. They'd planned to drug me into compliance, then parade me upstairs in front of witnesses who would later testify that I'd appeared lucid and willing to sign business documents. The perfect crime disguised as a family celebration. What kind of documents? Transfer papers for Sullivan Properties. They want you to sign over controlling interest in your business to Dad, with Mom as backup trustee. The lawyers have been working on it all week. I felt physically sick, not just from whatever drug they'd given me, but from the calculated betrayal it represented. My own daughter had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to steal everything I'd built. How much of the wine did I drink? Tyler looked worried. Too much. Your speech was starting to slur when I got you outside. The drug works fast once it's in your system. A taxi pulled into the parking lot, its headlights sweeping across us. Tyler waved it over quickly. Grandma, you have to go home and call the police. Tell them you've been drugged. Get a blood test done tonight while the evidence is still in your system. As I climbed into the taxi, Tyler leaned down to the window. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you sooner. I wasn't sure they'd actually go through with it until I saw them putting something in your wine glass. You saved me, sweetheart. You saved everything I've worked for. Through the taxi's rear window, I watched Tyler walk slowly back toward the restaurant, his shoulders heavy with the burden of what he'd just done. He was walking back into a family that would never forgive him for protecting me. The taxi driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. You okay, ma'am? You look a little pale. I need to go to Legacy Emanuel Hospital. Emergency room. As we drove through the night streets of Portland, I used my phone to call 911 and report that I'd been drugged at Riverside Grill. The dispatcher took detailed information and promised to send officers to both the restaurant and the hospital. By the time we reached the emergency room, I could feel the drug's effects more strongly. My thoughts felt fuzzy around the edges, and simple tasks like walking required concentrated effort, but my memory remained sharp enough to provide clear details to the police officers who met me there. The blood test confirmed Tyler's warning. Ace-promazine, a veterinary sedative commonly used on large animals, in the dosage they'd given me. It would have rendered me compliant and confused for several hours, perfect for signing documents I'd never agree to while sober. Mrs. Sullivan, this is attempted fraud at minimum, possibly attempted kidnapping depending on their intentions, the investigating officer explained. We'll need to coordinate with the district attorney's office. I gave them Tyler's contact information and detailed statements about the evening's events. The restaurant's security cameras would provide additional evidence of the drugging, and the private dining room reservation would support the premeditation charges. At 2 a.m., a nurse helped me to a taxi for the ride home. The drug was wearing off, but exhaustion had replaced the confusion. As we turned onto my street, I saw police cars parked outside Julie and Brad's house 6 blocks away. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Police arrested Dad. Mom's being questioned. I told them everything. Are you safe? I typed back with fingers that still felt clumsy. Safe at home. Thank you for saving me. I love you. Love you too, Grandma. Mom and Dad will never forgive me, but what they tried to do was wrong. Sitting in my kitchen at 3 a.m. with a cup of tea, I stared at the security camera monitors I'd installed just days earlier. The screens showed empty driveways and quiet streets, but I knew everything had changed. My daughter had tried to drug and rob me. My son-in-law faced criminal charges, and my grandson had sacrificed his relationship with his parents to protect me. This wasn't over. Julie and Brad might face legal consequences, but they'd also face something else, the systematic destruction of every lie they'd built their lives upon. Time to show them what happened when you declared war on someone who'd built an empire from nothing. Tomorrow, I would start fighting back. Monday morning brought the kind of crisp autumn air that usually energized me for a full day of property management tasks. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with newspaper clippings, police reports, and a growing sense of cold determination. The Portland Tribune's business section contained a small article. Local real estate executive faces fraud charges. Brad's arrest had made the news, though the details were minimal. Julie wasn't mentioned by name, but anyone in Beaverton's tight business community would connect the dots quickly. My phone had been ringing since 7 a.m. Fellow property owners, business associates, and longtime tenants calling to express concern and offer support. Word traveled fast in our industry, especially when it involved someone who'd been part of the community for 4 decades. Patricia, I just heard the news. Are you all right? This from Harold Martinez, who owned 12 commercial properties downtown and had been my friendly competitor for 20 years. I'm fine, Harold. Just dealing with some family issues that got out of hand. If you need anything, legal advice, emotional support, someone to watch your properties while you handle this mess, just call. Similar conversations filled my morning. The contrast was stark. While strangers offered genuine help, my own daughter had tried to drug and rob me. The irony wasn't lost on me. By noon, I'd received calls from 6 different attorneys offering their services. Word about substantial real estate assets under threat spread quickly through legal circles. I selected Maria Santos, a family law specialist with a reputation for ruthless efficiency in financial crimes cases. Mrs. Sullivan, the criminal charges are just the beginning, Maria explained during our afternoon meeting. We need to protect your assets immediately. Your daughter has power of attorney for medical decisions, correct? Yes, but only medical. We need to revoke that and establish new legal protections. People who attempt financial fraud once will try again, especially if they avoid serious criminal penalties. Maria's office overlooked the Willamette River, and as we talked, I watched barges moving slowly downstream. Steady progress, like building a business one property at a time, like dismantling someone's life, one documented lie at a time. There's something else, I said. Before we focus on legal protection, I want to understand exactly how deep their deception goes. Maria raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Saturday night wasn't their first attempt to manipulate me. They've been planning this for weeks, maybe months. I want to know everything they've done, everyone they've involved, every lie they've told. That could get expensive. Private investigators, financial audits, background checks. I can afford it. And I suspect what we find will be worth the investment. Maria made notes while I explained about Brad's failed businesses, the pattern of bailouts, Julie's expensive lifestyle that didn't match their supposed financial struggles, and the sophisticated legal trap they'd prepared at the restaurant. This level of premeditation suggests they had help, Maria observed. The veterinary drugs, the lawyers, the private dining room reservation. Someone with legal knowledge guided this plan. That possibility hadn't occurred to me, but it made sense. Julie worked in financial services but didn't have the legal expertise to structure a complex fraud scheme. Someone had coached them through the process. Can we find out who? Absolutely. Financial fraud cases often involve networks of accomplices. The district attorney will pursue those connections as part of the criminal investigation, but we can conduct our own parallel inquiry. I left Maria's office with a clear action plan, legal protection for my assets, private investigation into Julie and Brad's activities, and systematic documentation of every deception they'd perpetrated. But first, I had a more immediate concern. Tyler hadn't returned my calls since Saturday night. I drove to Portland State University and found him in the student union, hunched over textbooks with the exhausted look of someone who hadn't slept in days. When he saw me approaching, relief flooded his young face. Grandma, I was afraid to call. I didn't know if the police needed me to avoid contact or something. I sat beside him, noting the worried glances from other students. You did the right thing, Tyler. You saved me from something terrible, but I destroyed my family in the process. His voice carried a weight no 20-year-old should bear. Mom won't speak to me. Dad's in jail, and it's all because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. Tyler, look at me. I waited until he met my eyes. Your parents tried to drug me and steal everything I've worked for. You didn't destroy the family. They did. Mom says you're overreacting. That dad was just trying to get business advice and things got miscommunicated. The casual lie infuriated me, but I kept my voice steady. Did you tell the police about the veterinary drugs, about the lawyers upstairs, about the transfer documents? Yes, but Mom says I misunderstood what I heard. Julie was already working to gaslight her own son, making him doubt his own perceptions and feel guilty for protecting me. The calculated cruelty of it made my chest burn with anger. Tyler, I had a blood test Saturday night. The hospital found acepromazine in my system. That's a veterinary sedative. There's no miscommunication about being poisoned. His shoulders sagged with a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that his perceptions had been correct. Sadness that his mother was capable of such deception. What happens now? Now we make sure this never happens to anyone else. Your parents have been running schemes for years, taking money from people who trusted them. It's time for consequences. I told Tyler about the attorney, the private investigator, and the systematic inquiry into his parents' activities. His expression shifted from worry to something that looked like grim satisfaction. "There's more you should know," he said quietly. "Things I didn't tell the police because I wasn't sure they were relevant. Tell me everything." For the next hour, Tyler shared details that painted a picture of systematic deception far beyond what I'd suspected. Julie had been skimming from her employer's client accounts, covering the theft by manipulating elderly clients' investment statements. Brad had been running multiple schemes simultaneously, using my reputation as collateral for loans he never intended to repay. Most disturbing was their plan for after Saturday night. If the drugging and document signing had succeeded, they intended to gradually increase their control over my assets, eventually having me declared incompetent and taking complete control of Sullivan Properties. "They've been planning this for over a year," Tyler explained. "Ever since Grandpa died and they realized how much money you actually have." The scope of their betrayal was breathtaking. Not desperate people making poor decisions, but calculating predators who'd targeted their own family member for systematic exploitation. By the time I drove home that evening, my sadness had crystallized into something far more dangerous: strategic fury. Julie and Brad had declared war on me, involving accomplices, targeting my life's work, and manipulating their own son to cover their crimes. Time to show them what happened when you underestimated a woman who'd built an empire from nothing. I pulled out my laptop and began creating files, one for each person they'd defrauded, one for each business they'd damaged, one for each lie they'd told using my reputation as collateral. By morning, I would know exactly who deserved to learn the truth about Julie Sullivan Hayes and Brad Hayes. The systematic destruction of their lives would begin with systematic exposure of their lies. Wednesday morning, I sat in my study, surrounded by 3 bankers' boxes filled with evidence. Maria Santos had worked quickly. The private investigator's preliminary report painted a picture of fraud that extended far beyond Saturday night's drugging attempt. Julie had been systematically stealing from Pinnacle Financial's elderly clients for 18 months, manipulating investment statements to hide missing funds. The scheme totaled nearly $400,000 in theft, all covered by falsified paperwork that would eventually implicate her in major securities fraud. Brad's activities were equally damning. He'd used my business reputation to secure loans from 6 different lenders, none of whom knew about the others. The total exposure was $280,000 in fraudulent debt, all guaranteed by claims that Sullivan Properties would back his investments. But the most infuriating discovery was their network of accomplices. Rachel Morrison from the veterinary clinic had provided the ACE promazine. Attorney James Fletcher had prepared the property transfer documents. Financial planner Kevin Walsh had structured the asset seizure strategy. A conspiracy involving medical professionals, lawyers, and financial advisors, all designed to rob an elderly woman of her life's work. "The evidence is overwhelming," Maria explained during our morning meeting. "The district attorney wants to expand the charges to include racketeering. This wasn't just fraud, it was organized criminal activity." "What about the accomplices?" "Rachel Morrison has already agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. She's providing details about how Julie recruited her and what drugs were supplied. James Fletcher is fighting the charges, but his law license is in serious jeopardy." I studied the financial records spread across Maria's conference table. "What about the people they've already victimized? The clients Julie stole from, the lenders Brad defrauded?" That's where things get interesting. Most of the victims don't know yet. Julie's been maintaining the fiction that their investments are performing normally. Brad's been making minimum payments on the fraudulent loans using money from new schemes. An idea began forming, cold and precise. What would happen if the victims learned the truth simultaneously? Maria's eyes sharpened. Financial panic. Julie's clients would demand immediate account audits. Brad's lenders would call in their loans immediately. The house of cards would collapse in a matter of days. How quickly could we contact all the victims? Patricia, I have to advise caution here. Vigilante justice can backfire legally. The district attorney's office prefers to control information flow in cases this complex. I understood Maria's concern, but she didn't understand the depth of my anger. I'm not talking about vigilante justice. I'm talking about truth-telling. These people deserve to know they've been victimized. What exactly do you have in mind? I opened my laptop and showed Maria the spreadsheet I'd compiled overnight. 18 clients Julie has stolen from, 6 lenders Brad has defrauded, all their contact information, account details, and documentation of the specific crimes committed against them. You want to notify them directly? I want to give them information they need to protect themselves. What they do with that information is their choice. Maria reviewed my spreadsheet, her expression shifting from concern to grudging admiration. This is remarkably thorough. How did you compile all this? 40 years in business teaches you how to research financial relationships. Plus, the private investigator was very thorough. If we do this, it has to be done carefully. Anonymous tips, documented evidence only, no emotional appeals or personal attacks. I had already prepared the packages, 18 manila envelopes for Julie's victims, each containing copies of account statements, bank records, and documentation proving the theft of their money. 6 packages for Brad's lending victims, showing the web of fraudulent guarantees and false collateral claims. Professional courier service? Maria asked. Same-day delivery to all 24 recipients. They'll have the evidence by 5 p.m. today. Patricia, you understand this will destroy Julie and Brad completely? Their careers, their finances, their reputations, everything? I thought about Saturday night, the careful planning, the veterinary drugs, the lawyers waiting upstairs, the systematic effort to steal 40 years of my work through fraud and manipulation. They destroyed themselves when they chose to become criminals. I'm just making sure their victims have the information they need. The courier service picked up the packages at 2 p.m. By evening, 18 elderly clients would discover their trusted financial advisor had been stealing from them. 6 lenders would learn their loan guarantees were fraudulent. The network of lies Julie and Brad had built would collapse under the weight of documented truth. My phone rang at 6:30 p.m. Unknown number. Mrs. Sullivan? This is Margaret Chen from Pinnacle Financial. I received some very disturbing information about Julie Hayes today. Margaret was one of Julie's elderly clients, a retired teacher whose life savings Julie had been systematically stealing. What kind of information, Margaret? Bank records showing money missing from my investment account. Nearly $30,000 over the past year. The documentation suggests Julie has been transferring funds to personal accounts without authorization. Have you contacted Pinnacle Financial's management? I called immediately. They're launching an emergency audit of all Julie's client accounts. Other clients have been calling with similar concerns all afternoon. Similar conversations filled my evening. Julie's victims comparing notes, discovering the scope of their losses, coordinating their response. Brad's lenders were equally active, demanding immediate loan payments and threatening legal action. At 9 p.m., Tyler called. Grandma, something's happening. Mom came home crying, saying she'd been suspended from work pending investigation. Dad's frantically calling lawyers, saying something about loan fraud charges. Did you? I gave their victims information they deserved to have. What they chose to do with that information was their decision. Mom's talking about bankruptcy. Dad's saying they might have to sell the house. They're blaming you for destroying their lives. The irony was perfect. Tyler, they destroyed their own lives by choosing to become criminals. I just made sure their crimes had consequences. Are you going to press charges for the drugging? The district attorney is handling criminal charges. But this isn't about revenge, Tyler. It's about justice. Your parents have been hurting innocent people for years. Now those people can protect themselves. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, listening to my phone ring continuously. Reporters wanting statements, lawyers offering services, business associates expressing support. Through my window, I could see Mrs. Henderson working in her garden under the porch light, normal life continuing while Julie and Brad's world collapsed around them. Tomorrow would bring more consequences. Pinnacle Financial would fire Julie and report her to law enforcement. Brad's lenders would demand immediate payment of $280,000 in fraudulent loans. The house of cards they'd built through lies and theft would finish collapsing. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Saturday's drugging attempt. Peace. Justice wasn't revenge. It was accountability. And after years of enabling their failures, I'd finally stopped protecting Julie and Brad from the consequences of their choices. The phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. Harold Martinez, my longtime business colleague. Patricia, I've been hearing disturbing rumors about your family situation. Are you all right? I'm fine, Harold. Better than I've been in years. If you need anything, business support, character references, someone to handle property management while you deal with this situation, just ask. The contrast was striking. While my daughter faced criminal charges for stealing from elderly clients, my actual peers in the business community were offering genuine support and assistance. Family wasn't about blood relations, it was about trust, loyalty, and shared values. Julie and Brad had forfeited their place in my family when they chose to drug and rob me. Tyler, who'd risked everything to protect me, remained family. The rest could face the consequences of their choices alone. 2 weeks later, I sat in my kitchen reading the morning paper with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. The headline read, "Local financial advisor sentenced to 5 years for elder fraud." Julie had pled guilty to 18 counts of securities fraud. Brad received 3 years for loan fraud and conspiracy. Both faced restitution orders totaling nearly $700,000, money they didn't have and never would. Rachel Morrison lost her veterinary license. James Fletcher was disbarred. The entire conspiracy had unraveled exactly as I'd planned. Tyler knocked on my front door at 10 a.m., looking healthier than he had in months. "The house sold yesterday," he said, settling into the chair across from my kitchen table. "Mom and Dad are moving to a studio apartment in Gresham. Dad's working at a furniture warehouse. Mom's applying for retail jobs. How are you handling all this?" Honestly, I'm relieved. Living with their schemes and lies was exhausting. Now everything's out in the open. What about college? Tyler smiled, the first genuine happiness I'd seen from him since this ordeal began. "That's why I'm here. I want to work for Sullivan Properties while I finish my business degree. Learn the real estate business from someone who built it honestly." My chest warmed with pride. I'd like that very much. "There's something else. Mom asked me to give you this." He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Julie's handwriting. "I'm sorry for what we tried to do to you. You were right about everything. Please take care of Tyler. No excuses, no justifications, just acknowledgement and a mother's final request. She knows she lost the right to ask you for anything," Tyler explained, "but she still loves me enough to make sure I'm okay." Through my window, I watched Mrs. Henderson watering her flowers. Life had returned to normal rhythms, but everything had changed. I'd learned that family meant Tyler, who'd risked everything to protect me. It meant neighbors like Mrs. Henderson, who'd witnessed vandalism and spoken truth. It meant business colleagues who'd offered genuine support. It didn't mean people who'd drug you and try to steal your life's work, regardless of blood relations. "Tyler, how would you feel about learning property management from the ground up, starting with maintenance calls and tenant relations?" His face lit up. "I'd love that. I want to build something real, something honest, like you did." That afternoon, we drove to my first rental property, a small duplex I'd bought 40 years ago with borrowed money and determination. The same building where Sullivan Properties had begun. "This is where it all started," I told Tyler as we stood on the front porch. "One property, one tenant, one honest transaction at a time. And now? Now it's yours to learn from and eventually inherit. If you want it." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "Grandma, I promise I'll never let you down like they did." I know you won't, sweetheart. You already proved who you are when it mattered most. As we walked through the property, Tyler asking thoughtful questions about maintenance schedules and tenant screening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, hope for the future. Justice hadn't been about revenge. It had been about accountability, truth, and protecting the people who deserved protection. Julie and Brad were facing consequences for their choices. Their victims had recovered their stolen money. The conspiracy had been exposed and dismantled. Most importantly, Tyler had learned that integrity mattered more than easy money, that building something real required hard work and honest dealing. Standing in the late afternoon sunlight with my grandson, I realized the greatest victory wasn't destroying Julie and Brad's lies. It was ensuring the next generation understood the difference between right and wrong. Sullivan Properties would continue with someone who shared my values. The empire I'd built would survive in honest hands. That evening, Tyler and I sat on my front porch, planning his training schedule and discussing property management strategies. Mrs. Henderson waved from her garden. Business colleagues called with new opportunities. Life moved forward, built on truth instead of lies, honesty instead of schemes. Sometimes the greatest kindness was refusing to enable destructive behavior. Sometimes love meant letting people face the consequences of their choices. Julie and Brad had chosen fraud and manipulation. They'd earned imprisonment and bankruptcy. I'd chosen truth and accountability. I'd earned peace and the respect of my community. Tyler had chosen integrity over family loyalty. He'd earned a future built on solid ground. As the sun set over Beaverton, I understood that justice served was healing completed. The story was finished, but the legacy would continue in honest hands. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Was my response to Julie and Brad's betrayal justified? Or did I go too far in exposing their crimes? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like mine.